the strength training that we spoke about, and in the HIIT training, with the recruiting of those larger muscle fibers, the fast twitch muscle fibers, and you creating more of those through, a hypertrophy effect or just keeping them active, just having more muscle mass on your person means that you're having to burn more fat. It's just because they're around, and like that's why it's one of the key reasons why muscular individuals tend to be very lean and low in body fat, is because they've just got this high metabolism that's just always sort of kicking over. So if you're telling your body through the training that you want to have this larger muscle mass on you, that's going to be going towards burning more fat.
The topic of HIIT, I'm really fascinated by, because I think it's a topic that is so hot at the moment when it comes to wanting to look your best and get into shape. And it's an interesting topic, because on one hand, people believe that, oh yeah, I need to be doing some HIIT training if I want to be healthy and get into shape. But then on the other side, it's almost like a scary topic, because it can also be overdone. Like, it's very famous for being kind of overdone, and people who are doing it who shouldn't be doing it. So that's what I wanted to dive into with you today. But the other reason is because I had a really fascinating conversation with Dr. Phil Maffetone. I know you know him.
Yeah, well, for sure. Yeah. Phil and I do a lot of work. We're doing a paper right now, actually, together on brain health and the diet's influence on that. So yeah, Phil is an absolute legend. I don't know if you know the story about me meeting Phil, but it's really...
No, please tell me. Go on.
Well, I was a fanboy so my story is as a triathlete growing up, and in the world of triathlon, there's these two giants that really set the world on fire, and they were Mark Allen and Dave Scott, and they did this incredible race in 1989 on the lava fields in Kona, and it was captivating. It was caught on ABC's Wild World of Sports, and I think I was about a 15-year-old, 16-year-old at that time, and I watched it, and I was just like, oh, that's what I want to do. So I set yeah, exactly. That's how I got into triathlon, really. That almost sort of formed my why. For whatever reason, it caught my imagination. Fast forward maybe another 5 or so years, when I got to a higher level in my early 20s, and I was, trying to become an Olympian and professional. I was reading the work of Dr. Phil Maffetone and how he worked with Mark Allen to achieve these incredible results. Anyways, my story, then I finally realized that I wasn't going to become professional, turned to science. But then 20 years later, in my research, as I'm a professor now, I started to understand and unpin the importance of fat oxidation for high intensity interval training, which is, no one really thinks about that, right? No one thinks that your ability to burn fat should contribute to your ability to perform high intensity interval training.
Of carbs and glycogen, right?
Exactly. Yeah. You got it. It's exactly the opposite. The story that we're told is that you need to be fueling that with sugar, and it's all about carbohydrates. And there is a degree, and there's a little bit of some scientific support for that, but there was prior to our research, there was really no support for the importance of fat oxidation in doing that, and doing it safely and healthfully. And then we provided that. And then Phil reached out to me, and so you can imagine me, fanboy, and Phil Maffetone. I'm getting this email from Phil Maffetone congratulating me on this work that he's believed in for decades and hasn't been able to reproduce. So it was, and then of course, the relationship blossomed from there. We've produced many peer-reviewed papers and other things. He's helped me rehabilitate many broken athletes along the way, and I'm a huge admirer and follower of Phil. So I'm so glad that you were able to speak to him.
Yes, I was, and he was so lovely, and it was such a great episode as well. He's so kind and so sweet. But what's interesting about you two is I found that you're just so opposite. like from the outside.
From
So
the
he's
outside.
from the outside. So he's all about training slow. And like my story with Phil is basically I came across his work. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then I actually had a 10K run just gone. I'm not a runner, like I don't run much, but I basically was signed up for a 10K and I thought, oh my God, like I want to do a good job. So I just so happened to chat to him on the podcast and I had a month left. And up until that point, I was just running 10K a week and I was just going for it each week. And, you know, my time wasn't getting any better. Maybe it was shifting by like a minute or so, and I was just I'd literally fall in the door after the run and I'd be like lying there, like taking my shoes and socks off like, on the floor, like because I couldn't get up, but I was so hot.
Yeah.
So that's literally like how I was training for this 10K. And then Phil, we chatted on the podcast and he completely, as you imagine, flipped the switch for me. And he was like, don't do that. He was like, just, I want you to train at this level and don't do anything more. Don't do it. And I was like, oh my God. So I was literally training at between heart rate 130 and 140, about 3 or 4, 5 times a week. And I wasn't running 10K, but I was just training in that zone only. Yes. And he promised that I'd get a personal best. And I did. I shaved 2 minutes off my 10K with just doing that low intensity stuff in 1 month. Yes. So I was so blown away by him. But then I come across your work and you're all about the benefits of HIIT training. I'm like, okay, so where do these two fit together? And I think that was what I was most fascinated about. Like, where does the low intensity stuff, like when is it complemented by HIIT or is it not? And also I wanted to go into fat burning as well, because that is obviously like super interesting. So my first proper question to you is, what is your definition of HIIT training for anyone who doesn't know? And what does a typical workout look like? Because a lot of people think it's just sweat, you know, exhausted classes, crazy workouts. So what would you say about HIIT?
Sure. Let's start with a definition of it, just so everyone's on the same page. So high intensity interval training is defined as repeated bouts of high intensity exercise that is above your threshold. So you mentioned to me, Tam, that you were doing that 10K race, right? So it's higher than the intensity that you were going at for the 10K. So if you were going to average, if you were going to you know, measure that on your watch and get an average pace, whatever that might be, maybe it's six minutes per kilometer, let's just say, for argument's sakes. So your high intensity interval training will be periods of time above that, maybe at 5 minutes per K, say, if 6 was your threshold. So you've got to be in the red zone. And the other key marker of it is that it needs these pieces of unsustainable exercise need to be separated by rest periods or recovery. Right, so it's in the red zone, rest. In the red zone, rest.
Is there a heart rate that correlates to that? Like a percentage of heart rate? I'm just trying to imagine that chart, that heart rate chart.
Yeah, actually not. Like heart rate, you kind of take when you're thinking about HIIT, you should sort of throw heart rate out the window. That's not the best tool. It's a good one to keep monitoring. But you know, you can have very high exercise intensities, and you know, heart rate won't budge, right? Like if there's a long recovery period between that, right?
Is that because the bouts are so short that like your heart rate doesn't have time to catch up and tell you what's actually happening?
You got it. Exactly. That's right. So it's just when you're thinking of true HIIT, monitor it. It will eventually. There's a lag response in the cardiovascular response to meet the demands that you're creating. But much of that work is done sort of in that area where, you know, it's anaerobic or neuromuscular, right? So we have all these resources that are kind of on board to be able to sprint. If a lion is chasing us in the woods, we can immediately sprint away, and we don't have to rely on our heart rate to meet the demands of that sprinting away from that lion, right?
Yeah, because it's not about the oxygen at that point. It's about the other emergency resources in your cells.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. And once we get to cover, then our cardiovascular system kicks in, right? And that's when you, like, later on, you start to feel your breathing, heavy and whatnot, and these sorts of things. So there is that lag response and that is a really important aspect. But in terms of something that you maybe, you don't have to necessarily monitor that one. It's best to almost, if you're not measuring anything, it's best to just kind of go on feel and just sort of know, like, okay, I'm going to sprint over to there and then I'm going to pause. I'm going to sprint over to there and I'm going to pause.
And how should you feel?
You should feel energized, and like you shouldn't feel tired. So, like, how you felt when you splashed down on the couch when you got in the door. That's the no pain, no gain philosophy.
Right. Yeah.
Rampant around the Western world. But like,
and that's not HIIT, is it? That's not how you should feel.
That's not how you should feel if you want to be successful in it. You can feel, I think when we're young people, we can certainly get away with that. I know I did. I can smash, and it feels good to smash yourself when you're young. But not like, again, because your recovery processes are just so fast at that point, and so there's more leeway and whatnot. But when we live a few more years, it's stressful, right? Exercise is stress. Stress is good to a degree, but you don't want to be overstressed. And I think when you were just running 10K once a week, like, that's just like, you're just this big, huge amount of stress, and then it's like, I'm gonna flop on the couch for the rest of the week, and that violates the key training principle of training consistency. And that's what Phil got you to do. When Phil got you to slow down and run slow and run not stressful or in a controlled stress, he consistently trained you in that point, and then you developed your fat burning ability. And then the fat burning ability contributed to your ability to exercise at higher intensities. And then HIIT all of a sudden then becomes easy. But if you don't do the base training first, the HIIT exercise is really hard and not sustainable. And that's why people will ultimately fail if they don't have that base training behind them.
So what does a HIIT workout look like? What kind of exercises in a typical HIIT session? Like, if the first one that comes to your mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so many ways to skin the cat, actually, when it comes to HIIT. So there's no, like, I mean, I've got a 625-page textbook we can go through if you want. But
yeah, I came across that and I was like, I'll start that, and then I just haven't quite started yet.
There's a lot of different sessions, right? And there's, like, I don't know. I'm not gonna. I don't want to bore your audience too much there, but like, there's short intervals we can do, and there's kind of like those little sprinty ones that we were talking about. But then you might be, as a marathon runner or a 10K runner, you might be doing more longer intervals, like longer bouts. Maybe like, once you advanced and you're comfortable with the base training, you might be doing like 2 minutes hard, 1 minute easy, 2 minutes hard, 1 minute easy. That's a classic long interval program, right? And in these longer HIIT sessions, it is good to measure heart rate, because heart rate will climb there, especially after 2 minutes, right? You'll get it close towards your max. And then it remains high and elevated throughout that whole HIIT session. So there's no one tip, one HIIT.
So it could be like sprints, like a sprint HIIT session, or it could be like if you imagine a HIIT class and people are doing just some really quick shoulder presses and then just some press ups. Could that also be like full out HIIT, like shoulder presses, rest, press ups, rest, like?
Yeah. Now, this is the very interesting thing, because like, again, if we are to go backwards in time, a century ago, HIIT was not originally about that. It was invented by coaches to allow their runners to perform very well in the Olympics, right? So that was sort of where it originated in the earliest early parts of the 20th century. And then it's only been in the last 10 to 20 years where CrossFit has kind of come in, and HIIT has changed our belief system, where HIIT is now like what you're saying, shoulder presses and doing all these burpees and these kinds of things. So that is kind of, and there's, so it really, with the book that Martin and I have written, and Phil has co-authored as well, as Phil wrote the health chapter in that book as well, because again, all the things we were saying, like you can't do HIIT well if you don't have the health aspect and the base training sort of behind you. But where was I going with this? Oh, where like it originated with the runners and then progressed to other sports. But when you're sort of throwing in the HIIT classes that you're speaking of, and that that your listeners would be thinking about when they think of HIIT, those are great exercises, great for whole body conditioning. But I guess it's just a little bit of a different context than what a trainer might be using, like a coach that's coaching runners, or a cycling coach that's coaching cyclists, where they're very sort of specific with the prescription that they get. And then the CrossFit type classes can be a little bit more random. Everything has its place. There's no right or wrong sort of way to do it, but it's they're just a little bit different contexts, as we often say.
What do you think of HIIT? Like, as in, what's the shortest amount of time that you can do a HIIT session and get maximum benefit? So you've obviously there's lots of things coming out now. Get your exercise done in 12 minutes, get your exercise done in 5 minutes. Like it's like the time is getting shorter and shorter for people who just don't have time, or they don't have the motivation to do a longer session. Is that true? Can you actually get the benefits of HIIT in as little as 5 minutes?
Yes, you can. Yeah, like you see the gym that's behind me in the background here, right? Very convenient. So this is my workplace, right? So it's very convenient working in a gym, because I can get these, we call them exercise snacks. I can work out 3 times a day, and I do very regularly, but sometimes it will be only for 10 or 20 minutes. But I do that multiple times in the day, right? So remember we were talking about consistency of training. So you want to continue as best you can, work towards consistent training that doesn't stress you. So and explosive movements and like working on your strength is very beneficial. We don't want to lose our ability to for our muscles to atrophy, because that's sort of the program that we're on. When past about age 30 or thereabouts, there's typically this process where, especially if we're not using our muscles anymore, they start to atrophy. But if you tell your muscles, no, we don't want you to atrophy, we don't want you to go, and you continue to stress your fast twitch muscle fibers, then they maintain, like they hang in there, right? So you still want to do these sort of explosive movements whenever you can, and to your level of ability throughout your lifespan, if you can.
So do you do HIIT every day?
In a way, yeah. I think, I kind of always just sort of assess, well, what is it that I need? What is it that I'm missing in my body from bike training here to weight training there. And so I'm just, there's various, so I just finished a HIIT session with my Athletica team on the bike. So I made sure that my heart and lungs were working, as well as my fast switch of my lower legs. And then, I can start with some pulls and pushes as some prime movements, and do some squats. But there's I always want to be thinking about ways that I can, I guess, activate some of those larger motor units. Remember, and think about what we're trying to prevent in the future too, right? Like almost kind of think in your mind, well, I don't want to have a fall when I'm older, because I know that, that's one of the key ways that I can, I guess start to go downhill, right? Through osteoporosis and a break. And then, so, by doing this, I'm slowing that whole process down.
So you're kind of going down the line of benefits now, and that's perfect because I wanted to ask you about that. So first of all, you're talking about fast twitch, you're talking about motor units, you're putting in all that kind of muscle jargon.
I did what I said I wouldn't do.
Yeah. So if you could just, I understand what you're talking about. I know what those are. But when you're talking about aging, so it's my understanding that, like you said, from the age of 30, your fast twitch muscle, your muscles start to reduce and they start to kind of wear away unless you use them. I'm probably using terrible terminology here, but and basically as you continue to age, your fast twitch muscle fibers, they start to.
You better explain that to your listeners. What are fast twitch muscle fibers?
So they're muscle fibers that are in control of high intensity muscle contraction. So they're anaerobic in nature. They don't use oxygen. So when you're running from that lion, you don't have time to deliver oxygen to those. So they just use those like creatine phosphate and
and glycogen.
Glycogen, the lactate system. Yeah,
that's right. Both. You nailed it. Exactly. And we have those. And the other cool, important feature of them is that they're large and powerful, right? So
that's why sprinters have big legs.
That's right. Exactly. So if I'm, and all those HIIT sessions, this is why all the HIIT sessions we were talking about, they're of value, because that's what they're doing. Even in all the classes, if it's done properly and under control, it is engaging the fast twitch muscle fibers. So it's really good for that. Probably really going to be good for your core as well, which isn't great for us that sit all the time, as you know, in this day and age. But if I'm going to lift that bench press, I've got to recruit my larger fast twitch muscle fibers to achieve that task. And if I don't do that, though, over a long time, then my fast twitch muscle fibers, it just makes sense, right? Like you're not giving the signal to say that there's any need to keep these around. So what's the point in keeping resources around to be able to use to be able to like maintain these? Let's not waste energy there to do that. So the body doesn't. So you've got to counter that with your own training. Yeah, and there's no need to run away from lions so much in this day and age, which really challenges us. And we have to think about doing that. I have to think about running away from lions, because it's probably an important component of our existence as humans. We know that. That's why we know exercise is so important. So you kind of got to force yourself to go and do this sort of stuff.
So obviously, maintaining your muscle strength and maintaining the fast twitch muscle fibers and bone strength, bone health. What are some other benefits? Like why should someone do HIIT? So they're probably sold on this by now, to be honest. But any other benefits that you think people find interesting?
Totally. Well, the cardiovascular health is also very, very good too, right? So what happens is, so you were, Phil got you to exercise at, between 130, 140 beats per minute, which is great. Get that going. But it's also good to get maybe one session a week where that heart rate goes higher than that 130 or 140. Once that base is sort of established, then it's great to get the heart going at, say, more towards 170, at least kind of more towards, 80 or, actually more like above 90% of your maximum heart rate, because you're actually recruiting the cardiovascular the cardiac muscles of the heart more, and it's almost like you're giving a strength training workout for the heart. And so you're targeting that, and also the lungs too. You'll notice that you're breathing a lot harder as well, and that's important too, to huff and puff ultimately in at least one of your workouts in the week. So those are the other ones, and then there's the mental health as well. Like, it feels good to work out hard, right? Like like I did a HIIT workout early this morning. And I can just tell you that, like, I'm fizzing, right? And it was timed perfectly for this podcast, right? Like, there's no fatigue in my mind right now, and there must be some endorphins and various different, hormones and whatnot that are kind of buzzing around in my brain and keeping me alive, and so that's really good, because we're in an epidemic of mental health issues as well, right? So there's loads of benefits. There's loads,
and also the fat burning element. So that's something that I'd love to dive into with you right now, because as you said, a lot of people, like you said, think that, when it comes to training, there's the fat burning zone, which is the low intensity. So that's when you're burning the most fat. And then as soon as you increase the intensity, that's when you're dipping into glycogen more so. And fat burning is happening less. But then apparently HIIT is still great because it gets your muscles burning more fat after you're finished. So that's sort of where I'm at the moment. I'm just wondering, is that accurate, or is there more to it?
It is. No, it's pretty accurate. Again, it's not it's not a one size fits all. It's not like just high intensity interval training causes fat burning, or just the base training, MAF training, causes fat burning, or just weight training. It's just kind of everything has its place. So for example, in the strength training that we spoke about, and in the HIIT training, with the recruiting of those larger muscle fibers, the fast twitch muscle fibers, and you creating more of those through a hypertrophy effect, or just keeping them active, just having more muscle mass on your person means that you're having to burn more fat. It's just because they're around, and like that's why it's one of the key reasons why muscular individuals tend to be very lean and low in body fat, is because they've just got this high metabolism that's just always sort of kicking over. So if you're telling your body through the training that you want to have this larger muscle mass on you, that's going to be going towards burning more fat. It's hard to kind of look at it just in a single workout, and that single workout causes everything, and it's a culmination of everything. So
because I know you're all about lifestyle as well. Everything comes into it: lifestyle, nutrition, like all of your training, like everything. So much comes into it. So it's difficult to say do this HIIT class and you'll be burning fat. Like you can't say that.
It really is. It's kind of like it's to me, it's like a lifestyle, and it's like you want to have this sort of number of boxes that you sort of tick every week. Right. And this is what we try to do with Athletica as well, right? Like Athletica isn't just a cardiovascular kind of conditioning program. We've got strength training sessions in there as well. We really believe we've got the base training, the MAF sort of stuff. We've got the high intensity interval training. We really believe in the holistic approach to your health, longevity, and performance.
But it's really interesting. I really liked when you spoke about, so when you recruit the fast twitch muscle fibers, that just means that you have more muscle that's actually requiring energy. So it just kind of makes sense. If you're actually physically using more muscle fibers, then you're physically going to need more fat to burn for energy. So that kind of it's just like a picture that I can look at and say, oh, well, that's how someone can burn more fat if they actually start to work at a higher intensity. But so this is another really interesting question. So basically on my podcast kind of evolves as I evolve, as you can imagine. So I'm talking to a lot of keto people at the moment, a lot of carnivore people. And what I've always found with people around me is they say, oh yeah, you know, keto, I find it's great. But then when it comes to, you know, doing high intensity workouts, I feel like I just can't get there. Like I can't get as high as I can if I'm eating carbs. And that's just sort of how generally people feel. And I've kind of taken that on board myself. I don't know whether it's fact or not, but I'm kind of thinking, God, if I don't have carbs, then I won't be able to do this high intensity training that I want to do. I'm just going to run out of gas, sort of thing. So is that true? So if someone's on a keto diet, or let's say carnivore, or just any low carb diet, how do they cope with HIIT training? Can they do as well as if they had carbs?
Yes, they can. That's very, yeah, but it's so I'm kind of I'm on a hybrid keto carnivore kind of diet myself.
Oh, interesting.
So, and
Yeah.
so I haven't eaten a thing this morning. I've had my coffee, and I did the HIIT session this morning as well before I got on here. Still, just I'm not hungry, and it's just that's because ketones and triglycerides, fats, are fueling my body. So and I'm not hungry, and it's just because, but it's taken a long time to sort of shift over towards that. And my diet from last night is what's fueling me. Like, you know, my big steak from last night is what's sort of fueling me now. And so it takes a while to sort of shift over into that mode.
How do we do that? Because obviously not everybody is like you, where they can do a HIIT session fasted and still feel fine.
Totally.
So how can someone go from just a standard diet to then your place, like how you feel? How can someone become more fat adapted?
Yep. So, this is again, you know, I highly recommend, you know, go back to the Phil Maffetone conversation that you had. I'm not sure if he spoke about diet.
He did a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can go to his website as well. It's an excellent resource. So he's also in our book. He's written his methods in there as well. He's written the whole book on nutrition there. These are two excellent resources as well. This is my colleague Tim Noakes. Have you heard of Tim?
Meal? No, never. And I'm going to look him up.
So go to realmealrevolution.com.
Real Meal Revolution. Yeah.
Yeah. So and basically all you have to do there is follow the mostly 80% the green list of foods in your diet. And this is what I use. Like, so I coach many like professionals that have won big races in the world of Ironman and whatnot, like Phil did as well too, right? And that's really where we start too. We start with that book, and just it's a lot of the work starts with your shopping and what's available. See the cupboards behind you, right? What's available in those cupboards?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That is really like that's kind of like the starting place, because I've got my wife and my 13-year-old daughter, and you know, if things are bought in the household that, you know, I want to have those too, right? And I sometimes do, right? Sometimes I slip because they taste so bloody good. But when I always believe in like the 80-20 rule, right? Like, but when I get back into the 80% kind of rule, then I want to make sure that everything in my cupboards are what I know I want to eat. And specifically, I don't look at carbs, fats, and proteins per se as much as I think about the density of the nutrients, the micronutrients that are within the food sources that I'm taking. It often gets sort of forgotten. And this is why meat, when you think of carnivore, is so powerful, because if you actually break it down and you look at the nutrient density of any of the meat products, specifically like liver and beef, the micronutrient ratios within those food sources are off the charts relative to our vegetable sources. So that's why you can kind of get away with eating so much less if you go more towards this. And because your nutrient, like you've got all the different micronutrients that you need to build the key building blocks of you, which are like the mitochondria, all the cytochromes that are within the mitochondria. Mitochondria are the powerhouses of the cell. You were talking about how you felt better when you did your 10K race after you did this base training. Well, that was because Phil got you to develop all the mitochondria.
Right.
And he was basic, and that the mitochondria are the tools, the little powerhouses that burn the fat that we all want to drop. So this is why, if you want to give yourself the building blocks to be able to burn the fat, and then you want to tell your body, give your body the messages on how to build you back up to burn all of that fat. So the two kind of go hand in hand. That is really the trick, and it's not an overnight solution, but you'd be surprised how rapidly you can make these changes, right? Like even with your training, that was different. You made a big change. It took 2 minutes off your time within a very short period of time. So it's always sort of that combination. But you can go even further if you optimize the diet. And again, this is what I do with my elites. They can't believe it. They often come to me because I've got this reputation for solutions in the Ironman world. Ironman is like this big long triathlon race, and with the problem that the athletes have in that often is they're ingesting too many carbohydrates during the race. And carbohydrate sugars, the only way we can break those down in our gut is through fermentation. So they think they have to have all these sugars, but it's basically causing gas and bloating that debilitates them, and they have to drop out. And as soon as you take that away and you build them up with this good nutrition I'm talking about, you don't have to have that as many carbs and sugar anymore, and your body just runs on its own fuels that you've kind of built up.
So when you see people doing like marathons or triathlons or the Ironman, when they're having like sweets and like those glucose drinks, you think, well, you shouldn't need to have that. You shouldn't be at that place. You shouldn't be in the place where you actually need to have that during your event. You should be burning fat. And
that's right. So that's the trick. So that's what both Phil is famous for with Mark Allen, who's the 6-time winner of that event. And myself, I've just basically, taken a page out of Phil's book, and I do the same for my athletes as well. But we teach them how to burn fat as a fuel and get them just to be amazing fat burners. And we just reduce the glucose load, the sugar load that they have to take on in that race, because everything's on board. And yeah, their mitochondria of their cells, what I want you, the listener, to build are functioning so amazingly.
Because would you say that most of us aren't fat burners, right? Most of us.
Today, most of us aren't.
We're sugar burners.
We're right, but you're a better fat burner, I guarantee, after you did the Phil Maffetone method compared to before you met Phil, right?
So all of those 10Ks when I was exhausting myself.
Then you were a sugar burner.
I would, right. And then for that month I did of low intensity running, I would have become a better fat burner in that month. Correct.
And you can become an even better fat burner if you consider your diet with Real Meal Revolution or Phil Maffetone or whoever you follow, and take away a little bit more sugar out of your diet, and have a little bit more good sources of good fat, more carnivore kind of and you'll continue to move the needle. And yeah, it's like performance is kind of cool because you get to actually see right away the effect it's having on your body. You should just be becoming, exercise becomes easier and easier. You become less hungry and less hungry as you go through. And
So really, if somebody was to do, let's say, the Phil Maffetone stuff, low intensity, no stress at all, you're kind of chilling really as you're doing this workout, and you gradually reduce sugar, would you say reducing carbohydrates in general, so like rice, beans and all of those things, would you say that they're included to take out?
At least at first, I do. If you're trying to make this shift, it's a good thing to take those out. You know, I look at those nutrient sources, and they're good sort of quick fix. It's okay to have a bit.
Yeah.
But myself personally, I limit those ones. I don't feel as good on them. Probably nothing wrong with those ones.
Yeah.
And I think actually legumes, they go in Phil's okay list. I think he's again when
Well, if Phil says they're okay, then they must be okay.
but I think in the Real Meal Revolution with Tim's book, I think they're just kind of like what was he? I think he puts those on the yellow list. They're kind of which is fine. So
so like so that if someone gradually reduces their carbs over time, I mean, it doesn't have to be strict, like they don't have to be in ketosis, right? They don't have to be full low carb, they don't have to be full carnivore, but just generally like taking it out so that your training is kind of easy, and you're taking your time with your diet, making it healthier and healthier, and you will start to become a better fat burner.
You will. Yeah.
And then if you add in a HIIT session once a week, let's say,
then even better too, right? But see if you like test yourself, Tam. Like imagine doing that HIIT session without spiking it with sugar beforehand. See if you can do it. How do you feel? Play around with these sorts of things. There's no absolute right or wrong way, but it's like I believe that life is just an experiment, and you're always trying to find your own optimum. So what is it for you?
So what do you think about fasting then before working out? What's your thoughts on that? I mean, I know that you've just said that you're fasted right now. You've just done a fasted workout. But what about other people? I mean, you're super fit. This is what you do. But what about a regular person? A fasting before a workout is a scary thing for people. They just think it's, oh my God, that you shouldn't do that. That's super unhealthy. It's not good for you. Hormones, you know, especially females, were being warned against that stuff. So what are your thoughts?
I don't think there should be a lot of fear. I mean, like we were, again, if we think back how we evolved, if the lion comes and chases us, are we gonna, so wait a minute, lion, we gotta eat here first. We gotta fuel this workout first. Like you can run away from that lion, you know, and are you gonna survive? Are you gonna survive later on? No. Yeah, we're meant to survive. We're meant to do hard things, and that's what's on board. So I think it's
go on.
Well, I was just gonna say I think it's we are all influenced by each other, but that I just don't buy the hormone issue with having to fuel all that sort of things. I mean I'm all about developing feel, I call it, in my athletes. Like what is right? What do you need? But so, but I always want to try to encourage my athletes to choose like sources of fuel that have high nutrient density, and then timing of fuel to say, like, do I really need that for that workout? So because remember, if I was going to have my fuel and before my workout, I'm actually putting stress on my gastrointestinal system that's going to require ATP energy. And I don't want to have anything in my gastrointestinal system because that's not what I'm doing at that point in time. I want to focus on my exercise. I want to focus on pushing out power. I was pushing up 500 watts today. If you know, like that's a big surge of energy. And if I had a funny tummy to do that, that would distract me from the work that I have to do. Sure, have a bit of water around and stuff, but I just don't need any energy per se to do that workout from a nutrition standpoint. Yeah, like I'm starting to get hungry right now, if I'm honest. And after this podcast, I'm going to feed myself with a good feed of eggs and maybe bacon and whatnot. We got, all free range around here and whatnot. So, but that's kind of how I operate. And it's kind of,
I'm thinking like when it comes to the fasting part, For people like yourself and probably myself as well, like I consider myself, I'd be okay if I exercised after not eating, I'd be fine. I think sugar burners, like people who aren't fat adapted, they're the ones who may find it difficult to fast and then train because they're so used to dipping into sugar stores for energy, and they're not used to dipping into fat stores. So as soon as you take the sugar away after a fast and then they train, then they can't access the fat that they need, right? Is that literally how it is? And they can't get the energy they need for that workout.
Well, unfortunately, it's basically they need the sugar to trigger a dopamine response in the brain, right? And the dopamine is what is sort of what's fueling them over anything else. So it's basically an activation process, a central nervous system thing, and that's the only thing. There's no actual metabolism that's going on, so it's not getting burnt per se, but they're using that to stimulate the nervous system to produce the power. And basically the trick is, I mean, this is where a good coach can really come in and help an individual, counsel an individual to get off, because it's almost like it's more of an addiction thing than anything else, right? And a belief system too, right? So we have to break the belief system. We have to break the dopamine desire. And these are, this is classic addiction issues. So we're an addicted nation ultimately, and this is the reality. That is, and I had to do this too, right? So don't forget, I was a complete carb burner, sugar burner. I was a 2-liter Coke a day.
Oh my gosh,
student. Oh, terrible.
Wow.
I mean, honestly, the damage that I did to myself, Tam, I'm so embarrassed, but that was me. But it's, and I had to, but when I finally learned all this stuff, oh my God, it would have just made such a difference in my life.
So if somebody, how would you advise someone to fuel for a competition then? So just say someone's about to do a triathlon or an Ironman or even a 10K like I did. Sure. I was thinking very carefully about my fueling for that because it was a big deal for me. But how would you fuel for that then? Because obviously, like, you wouldn't eat a steak beforehand because of the digestion thing you're talking about. You wouldn't be fasted necessarily because of I don't know, would you? How would you do it then?
Well, again, I don't think you do anything overnight, but this is through a process, and you become comfortable with basically going with less. But the night before, this is usually again through a process of you're used to doing this type of work. When you're doing these races and you've trained for them, you've done preparation kind of events or preparation training sessions that prepare you for what you're about to do. But the thing you might have before bed would be like, a meal with a good source of animal protein, like a good salmon, say for example, with kumara, or a good steak with some asparagus, say for example, and you've had that, go to sleep. All of that comes on you as fuel. All of that gets converted into glycogen. Glycogen is a carbohydrate, right? And this is through a process in the body. Big word coming. Get ready, folks. It's called gluconeogenesis. It's the number one fundamental job. Well, actually, it has lots, but the liver is its key job. It rips all the parts of a protein and fatty acids off all the other fuels that you're eating and turns them into carbohydrate. So I'm a carnivore keto guy. All I eat is mostly fat and protein, but I have just as much carbohydrate on board me as anyone else that's just eating carbs and sugar and vegetables.
Wow,
and that's because my liver, that's what my liver does. So I'm not carb depleted ever. In fact, I'm even like my muscle glycogen is always topped up, and my liver is doing that job in me. So I'm never actually so short. So that HIIT session that I did on the bike, I didn't actually like when I was spiking out 500 watts. It has to be carbohydrate dominant, but it's done through the glycogen, the stored carbohydrate that went in my muscles that was ripped up through gluconeogenesis from the fats and protein in the carnivore / keto diet. Am I making sense?
You are, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, I'm just surprised because I never thought that. I thought you wouldn't have as much glycogen in your muscles and liver as someone who eats carbs. I always thought, oh, you have less, but you're fine because you're fat adapted. So
No,
you don't
Jeff
need it.
No, I mean, it's very well
I mean, your brain
established.
needs it, but
Yeah, there's this really cool study. It's called the FASTER study. You can look it up. It's Jeff Volek. It was the lead author in the study, and he showed this using muscle glycogen biopsies. And he basically took a group of fat adapted keto athletes, and he took a group of high carb athletes, and he compared the two. And basically, in the recovery process, after a 3-hour run, right, where you totally deplete the glycogen, after the 3 hours in like the repletion period, they basically both groups repleted the exact same amount of glycogen in their muscles over like the next 2 to 3 hours, and they monitored them. So basically, did another muscle glycogen sample, and it's no different, but it's just they went at it different ways. The fat adapted athletes used their liver, and the carb adapted athletes they repleted theirs more through the carb diet. But
so can you actually be a top Olympic athlete on a keto diet?
Yeah, there's many. They just don't, it's not told often.
Because all we hear in the news, let's say, is, when you look at an athlete's diet, it's just like this terrible kind of 12,000 calories of like pancakes and chicken nuggets. And I remember reading Usain Bolt and Michael Phelps, like all of the people in the public eye, and they're just like, oh, this is what I have in a day, like when I'm training. And you just that stuff sticks in your mind, and you think, oh, so they must need tons of carbs in order to get to that level. But like, obviously, I mean, was that just sensationalism, do you think? Just media?
It is. Unfortunately, I'm not sure if you're aware, Tam, but the world is kind of driven by a lot of resources and carbs and sugar.
Yes, you're right. Phil said that, actually. He was like, look who sponsored the Olympics. I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so true. So even those news articles, even they were probably just to sell those types of processed foods.
That's correct.
Oh,
yes.
I should have known. Why didn't I think of that? I'm so easy to just sway. I'm just like, oh, that's what they eat. Oh.
Yeah. But this is the cool thing about podcasting, right? Is that like normal people like you and me, we can still have a voice, and those that follow us, we can still have a voice, and that, when we know this, and we can explain that to the people that follow us. So but yeah, we need to be aware of that. That's industry is a big food, and even media itself is big business as well.
Just taking it to HIIT one more time. So someone who's like, right, I'm going to do my HIIT classes, I'm going to do my Maffetone stuff, and I'm going to go keto, and like, so I can imagine those really like motivated people, like we all know them, they just go all in and they just go crazy, and then they end up burning out because it's all too much. So when it comes to HIIT, obviously Maffetone stuff is really like easygoing, and it's very hard to overdo that. But when it comes to HIIT, I mean, obviously you can overdo that. So what is too much? And I know you're going to say it's individual, but for an average person, like, how would you summarize that?
Yeah. So I would summarize that as all exercise is stress, and then there's a stress response. So if the stress response, the period after that, is starting to run you down, and you're suffering from sleep, and you're not being able to cognitively focus on your tasks, it's time to do something about that. It's time to rest and recover. And so, like, again, I think both Phil and myself are very much into a holistic approach to life. There's balance. Everything has its place, and we can do too much of any of this. So Yeah, I guess it is individual. You do have to
Right.
look at your own
That's why you can't
context.
say how many times a week. Like, you just can't say that, can you? Because
No.
you're like, it depends. Like, you do it every day, almost.
Almost, yeah,
Mm.
almost. But I've conditioned to that over a very long period of time, and yeah, I mean, but I still make sure that I rest, appropriately, and I really, really work on trying to maximize my sleep, which isn't
Mm.
always easy. Yeah, sleep is definitely probably the magic bullet for so much of this. If we can maximize our sleep and try to get between 7 and 9 hours, sleep is like a drug. And the more we exercise, the better you tend to sleep too, right? So it's like, if you can't get started with good sleep overnight, a little bit of that Maffetone exercise is a great place to start, especially in the afternoon. For whatever reason, if you can exercise in the afternoon, it tends to kind of stay with you, and then allow you to kind of stay asleep through the night and get a full night's sleep. So for
Mm.
whatever reason, it seems that afternoon aerobic training is very beneficial.
Mm. So, I mean, with HIIT, like, you'd say, like, let's start with once a week and kind of build it up, and then just monitor yourself, monitor your sleep, monitor your concentration, how you feel, and that will be your answer, because it's
Yeah.
individual.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is individual for sure. And again, the big message, remember that the Maffetone training contributes to your ability to cope well with the HIIT training.
Mm.
So have a bit of that in your training diet as well.
And one more thing,
Yeah.
Phil talks about an aerobic base. You've been talking about an aerobic base with the Maffetone stuff, and I'm just trying to quantify that, if at all possible. So, how do you know when you've achieved an aerobic base, and then it's safe to start building on it with, like, HIIT training and?
Well, I think you'll probably be able to perform your easy long runs like you were doing, those runs at between 130 and 140 beats a minute. They'll start to feel easier, and your pace will start to slowly rise at that same heart rate, where you'll start to you'll feel almost like, oh yeah, I might be moving a little faster at the same heart rate. So and again, this is where you should be developing that feel for training. So just like what did Phil recommend for you, Tam? Like, where's the first place to start?
I mean, he said, you've got to be doing this for about, like, a few months. And even he couldn't quantify either. So I said, oh, can you tell me how long? And he was like, well, it's just and I understand there is no right or wrong, because it's just how you feel. It's just, how do you know when you've built your aerobic base? Well, you just feel great when you do aerobic training, and then it's getting easier, and then you think, oh, I think I'm ready to move on to the next phase. So I guess that's it.
I guess that is it. Yeah. And this is because, like, think of the number of individuals that are listening to this, right? Like, there's so many different types that are out there, right? There's going to be some that are so stressed and sugar carb adapted that they can only walk to begin. And I would recommend that's what you have to do. You need to probably work towards lessening the amount of sugar and carbs that's in your diet. Work towards just walking first at that 130 beats per minute, and it doesn't take long when you're really stressed it doesn't take long to get that heart rate up to 130. But as you develop, and you'll start to make progress with consistent movement, and you'll start to be able to do walk runs, and then you'll start to do runs, and then everything just kind of falls into place thereafter. So
makes sense.
Yeah. But there's lots of, just think of all the different individuals at the different levels that they're at, right? But yeah, easy, low intensity training to begin with, and then like you sort of said, just that one HIIT session a week is great for all the different reasons that we spoke about.
Lovely. Oh, well, that was such a lovely chat. And I just feel like I've learned so much. And like, I get the same feeling as I did after Phil. I feel like I want to go to the gym. That's what I want to do right now. Like, I just want to go to the gym and I want to eat some steak. That's how I feel. So, thank you so much.
Perfect. I think you need to do both of those things now.
Yeah, let's do both of those things. All right. Thank you so much for joining me, and hopefully we can do it again.
Sounds great, Tam. Yeah, lovely. Thanks so much for having me on. All the best, everyone.